Good morning, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Reinhart, the Adult Services Librarian for Essex Library. Thank you all for joining us. I have a couple of housekeeping details for you before we get started. If you could all remain on mute, they would be greatly appreciated. If you have a question, we'll be taking questions at the end. You can drop it in the chat, which is about 4 icons down on your lower left bar. I am going to introduce now Krissy Boys from the Cornell Botanic Gardens. She has been a gardener and land steward for the past 28 years. She currently serves on the steering committee member of the Finger Lakes Native Plant Society, and we are so pleased that she's here. Thank you, Krissy, for being here.
Thanks,
And with that,
Elizabeth.
I'm going to kick it over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm gonna just briefly mention that there was a period of time that I learned about native plants early on at the Brandywine River Museum and Gardens in Chadds, Pennsylvania, and I was tutored, mentored, and adored all the while by F.M. Mewberry, who started that garden. And I owe everything I know, I think, up until more recently, when I've learned from so many other people, but FM really got me started in all of this. And without her, I don't know what would have happened. So today we're going to talk about the native lawn. And then if we have some time, I might add a little bit about another type of garden that is similar to the lawn, but different. But we'll just get right into this. Oops, wrong way. So here we go. I wanted to mention first off that this is not a new idea. Doing a little research, I found out that, back in 1922, when Henry Hudson passed, he had been talking about not being a lover of lawns. And even though he was in England then, and he was still mentioning that, all of the other plants that are native there, he thought was better than a well-tended lawn. Recently, the actual native lawn that was put in at the Botanic Gardens was featured in the New York Times by Margaret Roach. And then very recently, Janet Marinelli's article in the National Wildlife magazine was released also. So many people are talking about this and trying, and I'm getting requests quite often, and excited to try to help people. I think the most often request I get right now is, what do? I put geothermal in. And I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget to mention, if you do think about geothermal installation and you want to think about a wildflower meadow or a native lawn, try to couple those two in the planning phase, and that'll turn out really, really well. Otherwise, you're kind of stuck in the installation at the time that you might want it to happen. So all of this for me was inspired by a tiny little grass named Danthonia, and I had no idea what it was, but I just found it looking like this on the edge of a seasonal road and couldn't help but want to know more about it. It was blue and it was orange and it was curly and it was tiny. I have since looked for it just about everywhere I go. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. Recently, I was there for a period of time caring for my elderly mom, and walked to the old park where I wandered as a kid. And what did I find? But Danthonia spicata under mature oaks throughout the park. Currently, I'm living in Brooktondale, New York, and the neighbors' lawn looked like, you can see my cursor, the neighbor's lawn looked like this early spring, I think it was, when we started talking. And she was inquiring about, what I do besides horses. Horses are a big part of my life as well. And I said, oh, look, you have some interesting things in your lawn. Maybe you won't mow it this year and you can check about what comes up. So they were fine with that idea, and they mowed parts of it. You can see over here where they did mow, and they mowed parts of this below. But what actually grew here was Danthonia. Surprise. So make sure I click on the right button here. Roadside bank in Brookendale, New York, just walking along the road, looking up on the edges, and I found it again, Danthonia. So it's right under our noses, and it's probably under your feet, and you don't know it. So let's get back to the Mundy Wildflower Garden, the Cornell Botanic Gardens, and talk about how I can get you oriented in this platform here on the screen. I wish I could be with you at least to point, but I'll use my cursor. So if you were to come and visit, you would find our Nevin Welcome Center here. Beebe Lake is not that far away. Campus is just up through here. And this is the Arboretum Road. So you can walk from the Nevin Welcome Center, the ground cover collection, the bioswale that's pretty well known by now, and of course the Robinson State Herb Garden, which is absolutely beautiful and stunning. I think all times of the year, because there's a lot of amazing hardscape there. And you can take this little footpath over Judd Falls Road and enter the Mundy Wildflower Garden from the west entrance. Or you can drive Arboretum Road and you can park over here in the Arboretum and enter through the Forest Home community and park at the east entrance to the Mundy Wildflower Garden. And then the native lawn is just a really short walk. This is going to be a little more complicated, and also take some ability, because we have a very steep set of stairs to get down into this floodplain forest that you can see is an actual floodplain, because here's Fall Creek, and at one time even I saw it flood into this forested area. The CCC built back in the 30s, built a beautiful stone wall along here to protect all of this area that was used. It's called the Rockwell Field Lab, used by Cornell back in the early later 1900s. And this is our water treatment plant over here for all of Cornell. All of our water at Cornell University and the Forest Home community comes from Fall Creek. So it's a special area, and the fact that this floodplain forest is here is really unique, one, to all waterways, because floodplain forests, as you know, are mostly developed by now. So that's a little bit about the site. Back to trying to orient you, the west entrance. So if you left the herb garden and the Nevin Welcome Center, you would enter the Mundy Wildflower Garden under this ancient walnut tree. That's roadside pocket prairie garden, we sometimes call it, also known as a excellent pollinator garden. I did a project with the Department of Entomology to come up with this booklet that's available to you online to help you understand about the relationship between plants and insects, especially our native bees. And in a moment, you'll understand why. This is that entrance today. So that was many years ago when it was planted, and it was short and just establishing. So these plants developed their own plant community. If you put them together, they do their own thing. And this takes pretty minimal maintenance, but it is a much taller garden now. This is what it would look like exactly at this time of year. And even though I didn't take this picture this week, but there's Monarda fistulosa blooming, and the native grasses have gotten much taller along the edge. Native bees, so they're super important along with all of the other pollinators, the butterflies and the flies. But bees especially became like a species of interest because of the population that we found on this west side of the garden. So these bees are ground-dwelling bees. They're solitary bees. They can live up to 11 or 12 inches, or they actually provision their nests. They lay their eggs, and they do use these burrows. But this is what they're doing throughout the season. They're provisioning their eggs, one egg at a time, with nectar and pollen to make baby bees underground in their chambers. This bee in particular is Calides inequalis, and it's super cute, and it's not a stinging bee, and this is where it lives. And it actually lives in the grass. This will be the site of the new native lawn. Now, the original native lawn was put in 2008. So we're going to go back in time, and I'm going to walk you through the process of what happened. But we're doing this again to like bring it back to current and also try to make it a good experiment. Years ago, the students helped me develop the top slope of this area. It was filled with invasive species. Your suite of Rosa multiflora, privet, buckthorn, and others. And we over time mechanically removed them. The students really put a lot of effort into this. And then we actually reseeded it, and we got a nice understory of herbs. This is above where you just saw them putting in the new lawn in the turf. So this is a little bit of a forested community. The Mundy Wildflower Garden itself, you wouldn't have noticed this on that flat map, but when you stand and look into it, you can be awestruck by the depth. So this is a glaciated topography, so it's a really deep bowl. The Cornell Botanic Gardens is actually made up of 3 deep bowls that were carved out many thousand years ago, and now are in different stages of stabilization. The Mundy Wildflower Garden floodplain forest in this bowl is actually the youngest and the most unstable, because these slopes are still so steep and they actually slough. You walk down, as I mentioned earlier, this way, so you have to be a little careful. You walk down a steep set of stairs to get down to the floodplain forest. And this picture was taken of the pileated woodpecker feeding its young on a tree right off the edge of these stairs by Paul Schmidt, one of our volunteers. In early spring, it'll look like this, with lots of skunk cabbage being the first herb to green up on the floor of the floodplain. Bluebells come shortly after that, Virginia bluebells. Now we're walking in from the east entrance to the garden, and this is the closest, shortest route to the first native lawn. In spring, the path is flanked by, I'll use my cursor, this is Geranium maculatum, Zizia aurea, or golden Alexanders, a little phlox, that's probably Phlox subulata, sedges, Viola striata, golden ragwort, more grasses, short grasses, but this one is Poa nemoralis, more golden ragwort, more Geranium maculatum, more violas. And then this little mound here is most likely, I think I can tell that that's like Solomon's seal, the Solomon's plume. And feet from that site is where we established the first lawn. Again, inspired by Danthonia. And why? Oh, because we found it growing all over the US. When I found this map, I was like, oh my gosh, it's everywhere. I had read about some work that was done out in the far northwest by someone, a Canadian, Jan Wire. And his work was derailed way back in the 1970s. I'm pretty sure by the turf industry. And you can do a little digging and find out about his work. And I still find it really interesting and mysterious. So I said earlier, you can find the Danthonia grass and other grasses, not just Danthonia, but our native grasses, which I really became interested in way back when I was with FM at the Brandywine River Museum and Gardens. So explore old cemeteries. It's a wonderful place to find native vegetation that's obviously never plowed. So those areas were never plowed, they were planted. And if the turf wasn't changed and just mowed, you'll find native plants there. Old parks, seasonal roads, abandoned roads. This is an old road in New York State on a high hilltop. So that is the roadbed. It was never paved. And Danthonia is growing right now, right in the middle of it. Oops, sorry. Oh, okay, back, following my little arrows here. So I want to go back. So spicata and compressa. So this one would be compressa. The leaves are longer. It'll also grow in the shade. And then we have spicata, which is the tinier one, and the short, very short and curly. The flowers and the seed heads could reach about you know, in some cases it could get about 2 feet tall, but it's always very sparse. And once it's mowed, it's finished. There's another place in New York State that's a fantastic site for native grasses and is an interesting site because everything's so short. So this site also inspired the native lawn. It's called the Alvars or Pavement Barrens, and it's way, way up north in Jefferson County along the Canadian border, where in a town in New York named Chameau, where the people, some people still speak or do speak French. Sporobolus heterolepis is a little bit taller clumping grass, but it's the dominant species on this site. It's called Pavement Barrens because you can see it's shallow to bedrock, and this is limestone. Yeah. Now it doesn't have to grow on limestone. These grasses, where I'm collecting them currently in large amounts, is acidic soil in the high hilltops. Why did the native lawn occur? Well, there was a Cornell Botanic Gardens envisioning plan, and some of the goals were coming through and crossing our desks. And, I saw this list and I said, I think we could do this. I think we could take this grass and, collect enough seeds and do it. So I got some support and we went ahead and put this together. And I'm going to walk you through the process. So this is where it started, and I will tell everyone to please start small, because that's going to be you're going to have the most success. I mean, it could be just a meter square in your garden bed. It doesn't have to be in your current turf. But we removed the turf. I thought it would be best to, even though I do not like using pesticides, but I really wanted to make sure the European, really rhizomatous, stoloniferous, tightly woven mat of grass that had been there for decades and decades was absolutely gone. So we did a glyphosate spray, and then followed by a scrape. And then we developed the mix, and we collected the seeds, and we put in some paths to make it look good. These new trails, and we started growing. This is us on our seed collecting trip. We did go to the power line cuts, the old seasonal roads, the cemeteries. We also went to, oops, I think this one's supposed to come. So this is the the scraping after that area was sprayed. And looks a little big in these images, but it's really no bigger than like 2,400 square feet. Oh, wait a minute. We took these seeds to the Plant Materials Center in Big Flats, New York. Plant Materials Centers are USDA, and they're around the US. There aren't that many of them, but most of them, if you have an organization and you think you're going to do this, most of them are welcome to open and welcoming to experimenting with different kinds of seeds. They have all the seed cleaning equipment imaginable. They know how to operate it, and if you really want a clean collection to broadcast, then this is how you would do it. We're currently working towards making these seeds with hope to make these seeds commercially available, but we can't say in quantity that's possible right now. Small quantities, sure. So this is how tiny the seeds are, and this is one of a list of the cleaning process. And I just have this in here because I'm pretty excited about maintaining that information, and I've been putting it everywhere. We sowed the seeds in flats. We sowed the seeds in pots, and we also broadcast the seeds on the site. I made a crude plan. I do not have a background in landscape design or architecture. So with volunteers and student intern, we created this plan. We knew we had a very tiny amount of seeds. So this area is what we actually seeded. This area is what we plugged. This area was placeholder grasses with tall, cool season grasses. This is what we called the wet ditch. And then a different grass was placed out here and over here, but not Danthonia. So this was the Danthonia location. And I might have to speed up. We added flowering plants as well. And I worked with a couple researchers, as many people as I could find, and then 2 researchers, Nadia Tyndall and oops, his name is escaping me right now. A very nice man from the USDA helped me with the amounts. What I was supposed to get would have been this much, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 seeds per square foot, and I didn't have anywhere close. So that's why I had to shrink the site and work with what I had. So I went out there and I did do this. I seeded and watered in, and fingers crossed. And 2 weeks later, I had some germination in some sites. 2 months later, it was still looking pretty spotty. I wasn't sure. We had plants growing in the greenhouse at that time that we were going to add. These are those plants growing in the pots. There was really, really beautiful little bluet population we added. And this is what it looked like later. Shaded conditions from the walnut. 12 weeks later, looking pretty good there. Sun, a bit more patchy, but by June, which is currently a June, or now it depends on the weather, but between June and July is when your seeds of the Danthonia are going to ripen. High and dry site, Danthonia and columbine, and I added some cactus along the rock. The low wet ditch was a wonderful site for iris. Penstemon hirsutus is a very small, beautiful purple flowering native that grows in between the rocks in our gorge areas. It also does really well in a garden. And I got some pushback on the cactus, but it's still there, and I'm pretty happy about it. So by the spring and summer of 2010, we were going to wonder if this was really possible. And by May and June, we were super excited. But by July and August, we had some big problems. And then by the end of the season, we were hopeful again. So this is a mix of the placeholder grasses because I couldn't fill all this in at once. These are those grasses when they get taller and age out, and they're so beautiful, and they'll do a really wonderful job in a formerly invaded site. This was a formerly invaded site, but they're too tall to consider being a lawn. That's okay. We're not calling them the lawn. This is the Danthonia in June of 2010. And the Tiarella on the edge. The wet ditch filled now with, this is our great blue lobelia. Carex grayi, a combination of the golden ragwort and Solomon's starry Solomon seal. However, in this year, a spot occurred, and then that happened. And one of our turf specialists locally, Frank Rossi, who's responsible for many turf areas throughout, I think, the whole country at this point, told me that my lawn was melting. So sad and disappointed. He also told me that I would need to use a very high-powered fungicide, which I also did not want to do. But I got some hand holding, I suited up, I sprayed with Manicure Ultra, and we had really good results. And by fall, that area was filling in again, and we had what we called seedling recruitment, and I was excited. I hadn't taken notes, I hadn't done much in between when I started to see that these these plants were coming in and filling in the bare spots, I once again got really excited about it. So yeah, so the next year was very successful. The next several years, the edges were looking really, really beautiful. The cactus was blooming, and this is the Danthonia going to seed. And then we would harvest all of that. I used a scythe. You can use a weed whacker. I have mowed it on a high setting, done all of those things. Other additional areas. So instead of the next additional area, did not use herbicide, used fabric to smother, and did not use the sand that we used the first time, which I forgot to mention, sorry. We used stone dust instead. It turns out that now we know the sand was better. The stone dust was not as good as an aggregate to help with the drainage and help the Danthonia along. Danthonia definitely seemed to like the sand more, so. This was just a lot slower to come along, but it did fill in ultimately. And each fall, this grass does turn brown, but it doesn't bother me. I like it. Some of the other species don't, like Antonaria, and the caryxes. So there's small sedges that you can also intermingle with the grasses. Beautiful display, the best year ever, I thought, with most Antonaria. The pussy toes is this little patch here, the Phlox subulata, more pussy toes over here. You can see patches of soil, but if you're talking about native bees, like we were earlier, this is what you want. You want a little bit of patchiness. So across the way here is the remainder of the European turf lawn. You can tell that's a pretty solid mat. Golden Alexanders. And a sedge that I absolutely love. Short, brushable, combable, rakeable sedge, you know. This is Carex pennsylvanica, or yeah, Carex pennsylvanica. I don't know the common name. Will grow in sun or shade. The Sporobolus heterolepis that we used from the modeled from the pine, pavement barrens, not the pine bush. The Sporobolus heterolepis in the fall, beautiful fall color with a backdrop of sassafras. Fall leaves on a twice mowed, maybe 3 times mowed native lawn, and the old sign. A close-up of what that might look like. Forbs are coming in constantly. So asters and other, you know, basil leaves will be blending in as the wind dispersed seeds fall in, or as these plants move in from the sides. That's what's happened here with heart-leaved aster. And this is the heart-leaved aster in bloom in the fall with the Sporobolus. So I would leave a running show of it across the lawn and mow the rest. You can get creative with how we call it clipping. Please do walk on these plants as the first sign. And now we have a new sign that represents some of the other environmental benefits and the water quality benefits and the bees. So pretty excited to have the bees featured on the new sign. Species list differences in, let's see, differences in the native plants and the non-native plants that have come in. So the spontaneous plants. So some we're pretty happy with, others we wish weren't there, but we manage them in different ways. It might be clipping, it might be some pulling, deadheading, but overall, there's no serious, we don't have to give up on this at all. It's still there after all this time. Let's see, there's one grass here I should point out, Muhlenbergia shrubberii or nimblewill. That's a native grass that most of us would have in our typical lawns that we don't like. So once you understand it, and you can develop a relationship with it that represents something entirely different. So at first, I didn't like it. I was trying to remove it, and I was told by a local botanist, why are you doing that? This is a native grass. Well, it gets a little bit wiry, and that's given its common name, nimblewill. But it's really not a problem. Once you understand it, develop, this understanding and acceptance, and you're like, well, that's a native grass. That's just fine. It's probably doing something. Sorry, I keep jumping ahead. Oof. Okay, here we go. The native lawn species list of non-native forms and woody plants that were spontaneous. Now, these plants, some of them do need to be managed more aggressively. So you would not want Rosa multiflora. You would not want too many trees in your lawn. So you have to either clip them off, dig them out, cut and paint an herbicide on the stem. You would not want Canadian thistle. So all of these weeds are always going to want to be somewhere if they're in the vicinity, and they have to be identified and managed. So what did not work and what did work, we had soil that was a bit silty, and the sand amendment didn't help with enough drainage, so that changed the species composition over time. We had plants that just decided they didn't want to be there, even though some people told me they might be too aggressive. Phlox subulata just decided it wasn't going to stay. The columbine, oh, it's still a surprise, but I just feel like the columbine that we used was more adapted to dry. You could use native plants that are more adapted to wet, depending on where your seeds come from. So they just, didn't stick around. And the bluets, as beautiful as they were like, nope, we're not staying. And that was the real surprise, was the pussy-toes, because that was the one that one of the botanists said, I think you're going to have too much pussy-toes. I thought, oh, no way. Dicanthelium acuminatum, another welcome, beautiful, small, very short native grass, and of course the shrubberii, and some of the European long grasses. We're very happy that the asters are seeding in. The treatments that didn't work, bloody glove sounds really bad, but it's actually a way to protect yourself from the chemical. You can use a chemical resistant glove, and then you can apply an herbicide with a cotton glove and just treat the plant that you want to be rid of. But it just didn't work. It went through an area, and I ended up with an entire patch of no vegetation. So I had to reseed that patch. Hand weeding on a large scale is impossible, we could say, but periodic mowing to reduce the height and minimize works really well. So the most that this has ever been mown is between 3 and 4 times. We have milkweed in the ditch, and that's a welcome invitation. We invite milkweed to come for the most part wherever we see it, but we might try to limit common milkweed in its abundance, because it can be such a good colonizer. So, but when you manage it, you would be careful not to do that after eggs are laid by the monarch. So you want to make sure that if you're managing milkweed, common milkweed, you would do that very early before any butterflies are laying eggs. Yeah. So this is the timing is pretty good. We still have some time, I think, to talk about this other garden, but I did want to mention the contributors. So we had many people from the Botanic Gardens, including my former supervisor, Charlie Smith, our local botanist extraordinaire and staff botanist, Robert Wesley, David Warrior, botanist with New York State Flora, Todd Bittner, my current supervisor, and volunteer Rosemary Parker, and student intern Lee McGonigal. And then all of the subsequent volunteers and interns have done something with the native lawn over time. And it was Scott Warnke. Sorry, Scott, couldn't remember your name, but Scott and Nadia, who have done, are continuing. I believe Scott's continuing his research in the US with the USDA and Danthonia, with hopes that it can be more widely used and commercially available. So with a few minutes to spare, talking about ways to use different substrates, and you'll have this presentation so you can take a better look at this later. But using pure gravel to plant our native grasses and forbs is usually, I would say, a great option for less weeds and better success with native plants, especially the grasses, not just the short ones, but the really big ones. And so this is a stream bank restoration that's anchored with little blue stem, big blue stem, switchgrass, and then the other cool season grasses. But those are our really large native prairie grasses that are also found in the East, not just in the Midwest. And we don't just have to get Midwestern seed sources. We can find these plants here locally if we look hard enough. They're in our midst. I think part of what happens with our native plants is that we just don't see them until we're introduced to them. And then, like the Danthonia, you'll just start to see it. It's there. It's right there under your feet. Let's see what comes next. I'm trying to find the way to advance. Yeah. So this site in November of 2015, planted in the gravel, looked like this. Summer of 16, it looked like this. It's right along the creek. And 18, it's looking even better. Oh, it keeps jumping, sorry. 19, the mountain mint and the little blue stem, and the Joe Pye that grows right in the water course is looking so beautiful. Remember, this was a pure gravel installation. We had to put signs up because people want to get down in the water and take pictures of the waterfall. Please don't step in the garden beds. And then by 2018, by 2018 and all the way through until last year, we've been collecting seeds from this site and enjoying the grasses. So we have both grasses. We have both grasses big and grasses small for you to learn about, enjoy, grow, and share. Yeah, and I'll say thank you very much. And I think we're a little ahead, so we can
We are.
start
Thank you
taking
so much,
questions.
Krissy. That was very informative. I don't see any questions from our audience, but I had a question. I was wondering how many visitors you get to the Mundy Wildflower Garden a year, and if you get like your counterparts from across the country wanting to mimic what you've done.
Oh, we haven't. We have some trail counters, but we don't have them act. I can't give a number of visitors, but I have to say that in my 30 years there, the numbers are up in orders of magnitude, just amazing. So we called it the best kept secret for a very long time. And now, the Welcome Center, the Botanic Gardens, and then people are always constantly filtering over into the Wildflower Garden. Because of the stairs, it sometimes limits and the access from the other side. And as you can see from this presentation, you have to like figure out where you are. And then you have to drive if you can't walk. That probably reduces the number of people to the Wildflower Garden, but no, high numbers. Yeah, now.
And then I was also wondering, we have a couple questions coming into the chat.
Oh, good.
One from Jim Childress. Could you elaborate on when to mow and how often?
Sure. So the first mowing, if you want seeds, you can mow anytime of course. But if you want seeds, you would wait for those seeds to ripen. If you want to let those seeds fall, they can fall naturally, and then you'd mow those stems down or clip them off, rake them up into compost. Or you could mow a little bit ahead of that when it wasn't, already dry. And then it would just mulch itself into what your existing project there. I was using a bag at times because there were maybe certain plants I didn't want, or I didn't want lots of vegetation falling on top. I didn't want to get a thatch going. I wanted to keep it airy and light. So sometimes I mowed with a bag and emptied the bag. Other times I did not. But when your height, your aesthetic is what's most important. So when it's your site, you can wait till it gets to 10 inches and then mow it back to 6, or you can wait till it gets to 12 inches and mow it back to 8. But overall, it's not going to get much taller than much taller than 18 inches about. So I know currently the homeowner, we have a lot of people questioning us about homeowner associations, the HOAs, and their requirements. And I think their requirements are fairly somewhere around the 10 inches and under to meet that. So you would just be working towards that height, whenever you need to clip it, just clip it.
You also mentioned that there were a lot of benefits to pollinators. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Huge benefits. And I could have put, it seems like I can add more slides. I'm excited. So I could have put some images of the students collecting. In the last year's group, we had students using nets and collecting from the native lawn and then comparing with the lawn right beside it, the European lawn, and the numbers of native beneficial insects were astounding. And just across the path, numbers of species, low, very, very depauperate compared to numbers of species and diversity in the native lawn. And Todd Bittner is determined to do an invertebrate survey as well. So check what's happening in the soil. And then I keep saying, we've got to do this in the turf where they're applying, weed and feed and herbicides, pesticides throughout the season. And I'm sure we're going to get, super low numbers and in both areas.
And then my last question is, for someone who is just starting out, did you recommend the grasses were something good to start with? Is that
just starting out with native garden or just
native gardens, native lawns?
Yeah. So creating something that works for you and that meets your aesthetic is really important. And if you wanted and things that germinate and that are easy to grow. I think the best start is with something called a meadow and working from having a lawn or the back end of your lawn. So keep mowing where you're sitting, keep mowing around your house, mow around your paths. But if you have enough lawn to convert a portion of it to a meadow, and then you can determine the height. Excuse me. So there's tall grass meadow, and then there's short and showy meadows. There's meadow mixes for wet, meadow mixes for dry. And right now there's some really great companies working to provide homeowners with seeds and a cultural guide. The best out there is Prairie Moon. But we're working to mimic that here in the East. Prairie Moon's in the Midwest. However, those species will grow here. Some of them are native here. The difference is you're using a genetically different seed source. So right now the science is not has not determined. We have scientists right at Cornell saying it's just fine, bring those seeds here, use them, the more the merrier. And then we have other scientists saying there's a debate saying, no, we need to collect genetically appropriate seeds from the area, local seed source. So you can choose right now what you'd like to do. You can go to a local seed source. The Native Seed Network in the Northeast would be a place for you to tap into. And those people are working on providing New England with local seeds. If you can't find a seed source in your immediate area, you can order seeds from Maine, from Heather McGargo and the Native Seed Project. That's not exactly right, but Heather in Maine has seeds for sale and she's selling them throughout New England. Or you can go to Prairie Moon Nursery and they will ship you seeds from the Midwest that you can use and put into your own meadow. Or you can go Southeast PA and order from Ernst Seed Company.
I think that answers Jennifer Chu's question about where we can get grass seeds ready to plant.
Right.
Natalie Coe also had a question. She asked, you mentioned getting rid of the non-native grass with glyphosate?
Yeah, glyphosate. So Roundup.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are there other options? She asked.
Yes, you can use sod cutting. So there's a tool that you can rent and you can cut your sod off completely. But at times when you use that tool, it'll still leave some rhizomatous material, root material in the soil that will continue to grow. So we've had that problem. I would recommend if you do sod cutting, that then you do a series of smothering with fabric. So there's no herbicides involved at all. You can either smother with the fabric first. Anytime you use fabric, you've got a place ready to plant. It's what might be left over if you don't smother it long enough and hard enough, and you're impatient. So root systems, can be really tenacious and hang on. So understanding what it is that you might want to be weeding that comes right up after you've got your plants in there that you desire is a way to manage that, but also just like continual lift the fabric, let it germinate, put the fabric back down. And this is landscape fabric that comes in a roll. A group of people could get together and buy a roll of it. It's about $300. And you've got many, many feet. It comes in like 14-foot widths that you saw in one of the images. So you can pin it down with what we call earth staples. You can put it down with rocks or sandbags or logs or soil. It works really well. Yeah, you can use silage tarps. Sometimes those become available. You could use a regular tarp. What happens with the landscape fabric is the water, it's permeable, so the rainwater goes through. Doesn't pool on the top or run off and create excess water in other areas.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where can people find out more information about the Mundy Wildflower Garden or any of the tips that you've provided?
Sure. Contact me anytime at KBF. Well, you can put my email out there, but kbf3@cornell.edu. Contact the Mundy, the Cornell Botanic Gardens, and through the website you can find out more. There's information on the website about the native lawn and about the other gardens too. Audrey Bowe is the new wildflower gardener. I'm in my semi-retirement phase, and Todd Bittner is the director of natural areas.
Thank you. And we will be sharing this presentation on our Essex Library YouTube channel if you want to go back to any of the slides. Chris, that's it for questions. Krissy, we thank you so much for joining us today.
You're so welcome, Elizabeth.
Wonderful.
And thanks, everyone, and grow and share, and good luck.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Oh, there's one last question here.
Oh,
Hold on.
good.
Hold on. Oh, thank you. There was a thank you from Jim.
Okay, Jim.
All right.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.